get started. Once again, welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature, The Secret World of Trees, presented by Richard de Gouveia and Matt Meyer. During normal times, Rich and Matt introduce NatHab travelers to the wonders of the African bush in places like South Africa, Botswana, Madagascar, and Uganda. But these days, they've been entertaining and delighting all of you via their Fireside Chat series here on the Daily Dose. We are super excited to have them back with us again today, sharing with us the wonders of Africa's trees. So gentlemen, thank you for being here, and Matt, please take it away.
Thanks, I'll steal it from Matt.
Rich.
Hi guys, we're super excited as Ted is, and thanks Ted and thanks NatHab for hosting us again on these Fireside Chats. We really hope you're going to get a lot out of these trees. It almost might seem like we're trying to find the most obscure topics now, but the deeper we go into trees, the more our minds are blown by the whole thing. I'm the little squirrel in the tree here because I can't keep on topic for longer than about 2 minutes and my brain goes. And I'm going to hand over to Mr. Matt Meyer here to introduce himself and kick us off.
Hey everyone, I'm the guy hugging the baobab in Madagascar. Thanks for joining us tonight or today, your time. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about trees. Now, there are few trees in the world that sort of deserve more of an audience than the quintessential safari tree, the acacia. Everyone, when they come on safari, that's the tree they want to see. That's the tree they think of. That's from the dawn of the Lion King, etc. It's the icon of Africa. Now, recently, Africa has lost the privilege of calling the acacia. That is reserved now for a group of trees in Australia, or the majority of the group of trees in Australia. We can still call some of them acacias. But now we call them Senegalias. And it's broken down, those are broken down into two. You've got the ball flower and the spike flower former acacias. And for the simplicity of this, I'm just going to keep calling them acacias. Now, they play an integral role in every ecosystem there are in, because they're a hardwooded tree species, so they're a nitrogen fixer. So they fix nitrogen. They are essentially a small compost heap in their root system underground, and there are a plethora of interrelationships between this tree or these species of trees and many other species that rely on them. At the bottom there, we've got the sociable weavers that use the camelthorn tree or the camelthorn acacia in the arid sort of Kalahari, Namib desert in the southwest in South Africa and Namibia and Botswana. They're a short, scrubby acacia tree, not much taller than about 7 or 8 meters tall. And these guys will, the sociable weavers will use them to create their nest and as the platform for their nest. Then you've got obviously the Acacia Gum, which a lot of people, if you look at the back of the nutrient contents in a lot of your food sources that you get in grocery stores these days, xanthan gum, acacia gum, it's used in a lot of foods. So that's a huge resource for people living in sort of northern Saharan Africa. And then it's a hardwood tree, so carvings, wooden sculptures, and also for a firewood. You can see that red heartwood, very hardwood. And then one of the sort of most well-known relationships with another species or with another group are browsers. So acacias are a very palatable, they've got a very palatable leaf. They've got their thorn. So a thorn is essentially a modified leaf, different to a spine. A spine is a modified branch, which is usually a growth form. So your bispinosas, your num-num trees, things like that, those, a spine is a growth form of a branch, whereas an acacia, the thorn on the branch is essentially a modified leaf. Now, those are there to protect the branches themselves. They're not there to protect the leaf. The leaf has a special security blanket called a tannin. Now, this giraffe here, you can see that long black tongue is essentially like a leather belt going there, wrapping around, pulling off of these little leaves that are on the branches. Now, if the giraffe gets carried away, the tree has no other way of, I mean, it can't just like get up and move away. So what it does is it starts to release these tannins. Now, tannins are gastroinhibitors. So if you find them in wine, it's what helps to give wine that bitter taste. And it is bitter to the taste in acacias and any other tree that has tannin in it. And essentially what it does is in higher volumes, it's a gastroinhibitor. So it will prevent the giraffe from absorbing any of the nutrients. And at even higher levels, it can be fatal. So the giraffe knows that once it eats too many tannins, it needs to move on to the next tree. But then you've got, this tree has this ability to let its neighbors know by releasing ethylene. And that can be released and carried by the wind to its neighbors within 50 or 60 yards. And then as soon as its neighboring tree picks that up, 5 or 10 minutes later, it starts producing its tannins, which are stored in the roots and in the main trunk of the tree, pushes them up to the leaves, and then it's got its security system in. But then, so that is a giraffe eating or browsing there. Probably the most fascinating relationship with anything are these guys here. So this is a whistle thorn, which is found in East Africa, in Kenya, Tanzania, and then southern Ethiopia, and southern Somalia and southern Ethiopia. And essentially what this acacia does, this isn't an ant that creates this bulbous sphere. It's the tree that does it itself. And it's hollow, or it can be hollowed out, let's say, by the ants. And the leaves there produce high nectar. And so it's food and it's a home for these ants. These are little stinging ants. Now these ants will come and hollow out that little bulbous, chuck out all of the material inside, and then set up shop inside. Now, wind blows, they know that there's no problem. A kudu or a giraffe or a gerenuk comes and browses for 2 minutes and moves on to the next tree, it's no problem. But a continual agitation of something like an elephant or a herd of Tommy's gazelles starts sitting there and agitating and agitating and agitating. Sorry, not Tommy, a herd of gerenuks will then cause these little ants to come out in their droves and start stinging whatever it is that is browsing. But these ants attract another species of ants, and those species of ants attract a longhorn beetle. Now, a longhorn beetle will kill the whistlethorn tree to the point where as soon as it starts dying, it'll start falling over. Its neighboring trees that have this stinging ant in them know that once that tree falls over, the longhorn beetle is going to move over to that tree and kill that one. So the stinging, let me just show you that this is tree 1 and tree 2. The stinging ants on this tree will start pruning their tree so that it gets further and further away from the tree that has the longhorn beetle on it as it's falling over. So these guys know that if they don't protect their home, they're not going to have anywhere to live, and they're not going to have any sugary nectar. And they're just, I mean, we could talk for days about acacias. The fever tree acacia, it sends out toxins from the roots. They usually live in wetter areas. So they send out toxins into sacrificial limbs, so essentially salts, and those limbs will turn black and they'll fall out and they'll die. So that's just a few of the countless relationships that acacias have with their environment and with host species or species that they rely on.
So we're going to jump into fig trees, and fig trees are amazing, and that stuff that Matt just said, every time I go into a tree and we start seeing how everything gets connected, it blows my mind. And one of the most connected trees on the planet is a fig tree. We use it to eat the figs, fig jam, figs and cheese, all the rest of it. On our trips, we see gorillas eating them. We see chimps eating them. That's another gorilla, just in case you think I don't know what I'm talking about. The lions use them in Ishasha to climb up into the trees. But these trees survived the event that wiped out the dinosaurs. And from that event, and after that, they had 80 million years to proliferate. There are over 750 different species of fig tree on the planet, and it is believed that every single one of those species of fig tree have a species-specific wasp that pollinates it. Now, the first stories ever written were written about fig trees. The Bible, Adam and Eve, the apple was actually a fig. It's believed to be a fig. So these trees have a long lineage of things that they go onto. But these tiny little wasps that go inside are about 2 millimeters long. And what happens is the female will fly around and she's looking for a fig tree of her species that she needs to pollinate, and she will look for that. Now, a fig is an inside-out flower. You never see the actual flower. The flower is inside the fruit. And what the fig has got is, for a very short amount of time, a small opening is there for this female to force her way through. She forces through, she breaks off her antennae, breaks off her wings, she's covered in pollen from her home plant, and she crawls inside there and she lays her eggs. And at this point, she dies. Now, the first two come alive are the male eggs. The males then come out. They have a penis that is twice the length of their body, and they start mating with their unborn sisters. This is crazy stuff. The tree is now pollinated and the fruit begins to form. The females come out, and the male's last job is to eat a hole out of the fruit so that the female can fly. Now, she is tiny. She's 2 millimeters. And fig trees of the same species will fruit at different times of the year. And how this female finds these fig trees that are ready to be pollinated is they send out volatiles. Matt was talking about this substance that the acacias send out to warn the others. These trees are now calling the insects, come to me, I'm ready to be pollinated. And this little thing can fly up tens of kilometers to get to the next tree in order to pollinate it. The other cool thing about these trees are the different types of medicinal uses that they have. So the latex sap is used by some of the African tribes to cure chest ailments. The bark powder is spread on burns to slow and antiseptic the burn. And fruit infusions are drunk to get rid of TB. So some amazing interactions, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper as Matt talks about the shepherd's tree.
So you're telling me that little wasp is this big and it can go 10 kilometers?
Tens of kilometers. Yeah, I mean, it's mad.
That's crazy. That's just absolutely crazy.
And the timing, 48 hours, Matt, that they have to get to the next tree and pollinate it before they die. They have 48 hours to live, so they have to travel that in 48 hours.
48 hours to do, let's say, 20 kilometers.
Yeah.
Huey dooey.
Huey dooey.
Okay, so this is a shepherd's tree. And I just can't do a webinar without having a rhino in it, unfortunately. I'm sorry. But as you can see here, there's a beautiful desert-adapted black rhino sitting underneath a shepherd's tree. This is in the Springbok Valley in the Pollenbach in the Upper Guinea in northwestern Namibia. And these trees, so they're Boscia. They're known, their Latin name, Boscia lb trunca, is directly translated or directly transferred to English as white trunked bush tree. And you can see that they've got a white trunk and they're a bush tree. They have the deepest roots in the world. So twice the length of a blue whale. You're looking at about just shy of 70 meters that the tap roots of a shepherd's tree can go down. And that is the tap into these massive underground water aquifers found in the regions that they grow. So Namibia, extremely rocky, extremely arid, moon-like landscape. The oldest desert in the world, the Namib Desert, well over 200 million years old. And so they use these tap roots to tap down into these aquifers. I mean, look there, that looks like it should be called a rock fig, but it's a shepherd's tree growing out of a rock. Now, they're evergreen, and they've got these tiny little leaves. And that gives them that almost umbrella-like shape that they've got. Umbrella sort of canopy shading that they have. And that's where their namesake comes from, the shepherd's tree. Used for hundreds or tens of thousands of years by herders to sit under while watching their goats and sheep roam around the desert. The San have used them. They look for their hollowed out logs because it's an incredibly hard wooded tree. And when one of the limbs will die, it'll hollow out. And that will sometimes fill with the 100 mils of water that fall every 5 or 10 years in some of these areas. And that'll hold the water in the bush when we look for those. They've got a cherry-sized yellowish orange fruit that it's kind of a little bit sour to the taste, but it makes spectacular jams. They don't last very long. These ants and little beetles love them, but they're a little bit sour. But they've got a good vitamin C and a good iron content. The roots are edible, so either they'll be ground up and made into a sort of a brownish porridge, or they can be dried and used almost like a chicory root, so like a coffee substitute. And then the roots are also highly antifungal. So they have been used as like a food preservative. So, you know, when you go and you open up a really highly processed bag of something and you find that little bag of kernels of a moisture sucker or moisture absorbent, that's essentially what these can be used as. So if you cut the roots up, you dry them out, you put them in food or whatever you serve, it has antifungal properties. So another incredible tree that has been used by the people that have lived in this area, particularly, especially the people like the Khoisan who have lived there for their entire lives, and they use these trees. They sit under them. They find water in them. They use their roots. They eat their tree. They eat the fruits, and rhinos love them too. So that's why I like them.
That's a good reason right there, Matt. We're going to talk about the next group of trees, which are called the Combretum. So it's quite a broad group. There's a few that I'm going to mention, but one of the things that they have in common with one another is they have a 3, 4, 5 winged pod that sits on them. And these trees are very hardwood trees. So just to describe how a tree grows, we've all heard, and you might have heard how if you cut a tree, which you don't want to do just to age it, because then it won't grow anymore, and you can count the rings on the stump, which will tell you its growth pattern. So every year, a new growth ring forms, and so it gets bigger and bigger. These guys grow really slowly, and the slower you grow, the harder your wood gets, and the slower you grow, the longer your lifespan. So this is a dead leadwood. Leadwood, as their name suggests, the wood is very heavy because of this density. It is so dense that it is 1,214 kilograms per square meter. So it's denser than water. It's not a great thing to make a boat out of, because it's probably not going to float very long. But when they die, because of the hard wood, they can stay standing for up to 50 years after their death, just because it's so hard to break down. And the longest living one that was ever found and recorded so far was 1,020 years old. So quite a long amount of time. And these trees grow in these thickets, and we need balance. Nature has to have a balance. There has to be a way of maintaining something. So what this tree has got are these seed pods, and within the seed pods, in order to try and stop things from eating them, they have an excess amount of cyanide. The seed pods, if you remove the seed, can be used to brew a tea. Just don't do it with the seed, because that could be quite deadly. And what happens is there is a beautiful little butterfly called a Guinea fowl butterfly. And this butterfly has specialized in laying its eggs on these seed pods. And the butterfly will lay its seed on there. The caterpillar will go inside and eat the seed. No cyanide poisoning, no issues. But now something needs to control the Guinea fowl butterfly. So along comes a beautiful little bird called the southern black tit. And this guy will actually pick up these seeds, pull them and tap them, and he'll be able to hear whether there is a caterpillar inside there, and he will then strip that out and eat that caterpillar, who again, he is not influenced by that cyanide which the caterpillar is taken in. So quite an interesting way that it works back and forth. And it has some amazing medicinal properties, these trees. So the bark is used for tanning leather in the russet bush willows. The Combretum zahiri, which is a large fruited bush willow, has a gum that has antibiotic properties. And the leaves, when mixed with an oil, are used for neck and back aches. So those who've been to Madagascar with Matt and I will attest that there might be a neck ache from staring up at lemurs. This is a great thing to find. And then this guy here, the leadwood, because it is such a long living tree, the Ovamba people in Namibia worship this tree. Every time they go past it, they will stop to pay their respects, because they believe that this tree is the ancestor, or holds the ancestor of all people and animals. Matt, I think you're up next with a sausage tree, my friend.
Yeah, it's just to go back to the leadwood and the Combretum and Madagascar. My guests often wonder why for the first 2 days I walk around like this, and I'm just sort of stretching so that I've got the back of my neck muscles that I can look up, because yeah, that would come in handy to have something to rub on the back of your neck. Much like this elephant who is sitting staring up at a sausage tree. I think this is actually taken up in Mana Pools, or up maybe near Mashatu somewhere, sort of on that. I think this was in Mashatu. So Kagili africana, they are known for their namesake, the sausage tree. So they've got these blood red tulip flowers that are pollinated by bats. They're part of the begonia family, which also has some very famous trees, the jacaranda tree from South America, the calabash and the honeysuckle trees. Now, these flowers will bloom, and they can stay in bloom for up to 2 months at a time. So essentially the opposite of a baobab, which we'll talk about in a little bit. They've got this incredibly pungent and powerful smell, and that is what attracts the fruit bats that come to pollinate them. And the fruit can weigh up to 10 kilos or so. So a good 22 to 24 pounds. So not a tree that you would want to go and take an afternoon nap under. It's happened a few times where you're sitting with a pride of lions that are sleeping under a tree next to a sausage tree, or you're watching a leopard in a sausage tree, and you hear this doof, and you look, and one of these butternut squash sized sausages has fallen out of the tree. Now, inside this sausage, it's a very fiber. So if you can imagine essentially what a butternut squash or a spaghetti squash looks like, if you were to just cut it in half. It's very, it looks similar to that, but it's very fibrous, big pumpkin seed sized seeds. And they're liked often only in the drier months by baboons, monkeys, porcupines, kudu, and elephants. And the elephants are typically the animals that are their dispersal mechanism. So all of the other animals will actually eat and consume the seed, whereas the elephant will just kind of take the whole sausage, chomp it a few times, chew it up a little bit, and then swallow it, because it is very fibrous, as I mentioned. Now, the wood is very strong, and it's water resistant as well. So if any of you have been on a safari in Botswana in the Okavango Delta, where you go on a mokoro ride. Now, the mokoros, a traditional mokoro, is made from one of several trees, the sausage tree being one of them, because of its water resistance. But it's also it's a very hard wood, but it's fairly light. So it's not like a leadwood that Rich was talking about, which I would not recommend building a mokoro out of, because it would sink you. I mean, the Okavango Delta is only it's the 10-meter drop from the source to the bottom, but still, when you're going through those channels and you've got a crocodile or a hippo that's coming underneath the mokoro, you don't want to be sinking. So some of the African tribes do worship these trees. The Ndebele in Zimbabwe, actually, they will take one of the fruit. So let's say someone from your family dies far, far away from home, they will take a fruit of a sausage tree from your homeland, from your home area, and bury it in the traditional burial grounds of your family as a representation of you as a person, because of how hollowed this tree is. And then a lot of sort of medicinal properties across most of Africa. They use it to treat dysentery, rheumatism, and several other ailments. But a tree, nonetheless, that, yes, like I said, I would not recommend taking a nap under, but incredibly nutritious leaves for things like the elephants to go and consume. And then the flowers are just unbelievable. I mean, in Nyala, we had them at in the camp at Mala Mala. I'm sure you had them in Sabi Sabi, Rich. And when they start flowering and when they start fruiting and those flowers fall onto the ground, I think the one time at Mala Mala outside room 15 and 16, we had probably a herd of about 30 or 40 in Nyala underneath this sausage tree, just chomping up all of these individual flowers. They love it. Absolutely love it.
The other thing about flowers, and these being red flowers, is we forget how intelligent and how things co-evolve, things work together. So this tree, like Matt said, and I didn't show the picture nicely when he was talking about it, but they're pollinated solely by fruit bats. Nothing else pollinates them. So they require that pungent smell to be able to draw these things in, and color doesn't really make a difference in its flower. But other flowers have co-evolved to what they need. So your blues and violet flowers are generally pollinated by bees. Your hummingbirds will go towards flowers that are pink, red, fuchsia, or purple. Butterflies generally stick to yellows, oranges, pinks, and reds. And then obviously your moths and bats will be flower fragrances. So your jasmines often come out at night and open up to get moths in there. And you even have some flowers, the corpse flower, that actually smells like a rotting carcass, to get flies to come in and pollinate it. So really interesting pollinating ways of doing things. So there's always a cool way to mix things up. And we're now going to talk about the Marula tree. Marula, Amarula, some of you would have been to Africa and had a great opportunity to enjoy this liqueur. It's a cream liqueur that's made from these fruits. It works wonders in a morning coffee. Yes, in a morning coffee. It's cheating because it's holiday, so it's okay. And these things create these yellow fruits like this. And these fruits are packed with vitamin C, 20 times the vitamin C of an orange, and these guys are part of the mango family. But the fruit is only about yay big, and it has a big pip like a mango does. So you actually have to chew around it, and everything tries to come and eat it. You'll get us, obviously, warthogs, nyala, bushbuck, impala, elephants, all sorts of animals trying to come in. Your insects will be in there trying to get it. And one of the major dispersal mechanisms, again, just like the sausage tree, is an elephant. And these guys rely heavily, or the Marula tree relies heavily on elephants. And what the elephants do is they will literally walk up to a tree. If there are not enough fruit on the ground, they will shake the tree and the fruit will drop down to the ground. They will then pick them up, break it open with a tooth, and just swallow them whole like that. Just break the skin and swallow, break and swallow, break and swallow, eating hundreds to thousands of fruits every day. Now, there's a myth that elephants get drunk off this fruit. It is a myth because it was shown in one documentary, and it was actually an elephant that was darted and anesthetized and looked all wobbly. The fact of the matter is these fruits do not stick around long enough to ferment in a natural sense in order to make these animals drunk. But what happens is, as the fruit goes through, it is attacked by the stomach acids. It breaks the layer around the pip of the fruit, making it better. And then it comes out of the other end of the elephant in a large pile of compost. So it's perfect. So at the end of summer, we see all these elephant droppings with these little marula sprouts coming out. Some of the fruits are even so untouched that you'd be able to go in and break it open and eat it yourself. And for shock factor, I'm sure Matt's done it with his guests too. I've never done such a thing. I would never, ever. But the
I
local...
actually remember, I'm going to hold you to that, because I remember when I was testing and aging an elephant dung, you told me that you had done it yourself.
Yeah, no doubt I had. I'm just joking. So this is something that happens every year. Is the tribes around the areas where marula fruits grow, the Shangaan people have a great ceremony where they have a massive party. So the chief will send out one of his wives. She can take a couple of friends with them, and they collect these marulas, and then they ferment them. They make a marula beer, often in big, massive 10-gallon dustbins, and they make these brews of beer that will knock you 6 ways from Sunday. And then they have this massive run-around party where the ladies are not allowed to sit on chairs because they're of the fear that they might fall off of them. And because the guys are going so silly on this stuff, they sing songs about not procreating or having an affair with another man's wife all through the night, just to ensure that they keep their wits about them through the drunkenness that goes on. But fruit forms a massively important part of a tree's life cycle because it is the way it spreads its seed. And another really cool tree that does that is a baobab tree. Matt?
So baobabs are arguably one of the most interesting species of tree, or interesting group of trees in the world. They're found in Africa, mainland and Madagascar. So mainland, continental and Madagascar, and then also in Australia. 8 or 9 species of baobabs around the world. They're still contesting whether or not it's 2 species in Africa or not. So 1 found in Africa, 5 that are endemic, or 6 that are endemic to Madagascar, and then 1 in Australia. Now, their trunks can hold up to about 32,000 gallons of water, and they can live well over 3,000 years old. And as Rich was saying earlier, how you would age a tree is you do a transect through it and you count the rings going out of it. But then obviously once you've done that, the tree is dead. Now, baobabs, you can't do that, because essentially baobabs are they're a bunch of trees. So they've got these individual stems growing in amongst this giant tree, which is essentially a big sponge. So if you can imagine what a loofah looks like, a shower loofah, that's what a baobab looks like inside. So fairly hollowed out center. Still there's fiber in that, but like a sausage. And then on the outside and the perimeter, you've got this mass and accumulation of stems that actually have bark growing on the inside of the tree. Now, these guys, I mean, you can see just by the sheer size of them there. I mean, that's an elephant. It takes a lot to dwarf an elephant. So the flowers open at night and they'll fall within 24 hours. Now, depending on where in the world this baobab would occur will depend on what it's pollinated by. The African baobab, so one of the two species, they're pollinated by bats, and they will stagger their, essentially they'll stagger their bloom. So let's say this tree over here wants its pollen to be dispersed. It will bloom over a series of weeks so that a bat will come in, start drinking the nectar. It's not going to get its full off of one tree. So it has to move from this tree to the next tree that's in bloom, have 2 or 3 of those flowers, and then move to the next, and move to the next, and move to the next. And that is how pollination occurs. And that will obviously promote cross-pollination. Now in Madagascar, they are pollinated by hawkmoths and also some of our favorite little creatures, the mouse lemur. So these little mouse lemurs, after their sort of micro-hibernation, so torpor undergoes through the cold winter months where they don't necessarily hibernate entirely for a 5 or 6 month period. The fat-tailed dwarf lemurs do that, where they can actually hibernate for up to 7 months. That's a mammal this big, hibernating for 7 months. So the mouse lemurs will undergo torpor. They'll start coming out of that cycle in sort of your September, October timeframe. So just towards the end of spring, coming into summer, and then that's when the baobabs will bloom. And these little guys will go around and ferociously eat and drink all the nectar they can, thereby pollinating as many of these baobabs as they can. And so they will come feed on the nectar and move off to the next one. In Australia, also, it's hawkmoths. Hawkmoths they're quite a large moth, but they look almost like a fighter jet, and they've got this massively long proboscis, which I've actually had one drinking out of my beer glass on safari. They love the sweet, the sweet taste. Now, this is all well and good in these 3 areas where they're known to grow. In Africa, they are dispersed by elephants and hippos and other large herbivores. They've got an incredibly hard. So once the fruits and it dries out and it falls, it's very hard, like coconut hard. Now, elephants can crack that open, and then other animals will feed off of that fruit and disperse it elsewhere. In Madagascar, unfortunately, all of the mega herbivores that have led to the dispersal of these have gone extinct. So the giant sloth lemur, the pygmy hippo, and the elephant bird, so a bird twice the height of an ostrich, are all locally extinct. So, or all extinct worldwide because they were endemic to Madagascar. So essentially, all of the baobabs that are there now, or the baobabs that are germinating, are in the seed bank or are in existence as it is. So from now until the future, unless there are programs that are undergone whereby they are reintroducing baobabs into their natural environments, they will start becoming locally extinct in different areas. In terms of their medicinal or their human use properties, their leaves are incredibly high in iron. So if picked and boiled, they can be like spinach. The fruit is one of the superfoods that has become worldwide, or has got worldwide famous in the last 10 or 15 years. It has the bark can be stripped and used for rope because of its fibrousness, and then the fruit pulp is edible. It kind of has the texture of like a sweet melon, but with none of the sweet really. It's kind of an odd taste to it. And the root system here, as you can see, as Richard just pulled up now, it's got a very shallow root system. So it's got one big deep tap root that doesn't, it kind of goes maybe the height of the tree down, but then most of its root network is on top of that surface. So like in one of the forests that we go to in southwestern Madagascar, you actually see the roots of the baobab before you see the tree in Zombetse National Park. And then an interesting, this is also another one from Madagascar, down in the bottom left there. So this is a tree, the water tank tree in the Mahafali region or Mahafali Plateau in western Madagascar, where these local villagers have actually dug a hole into this tree and they harvest water out of this baobab tree. So if you can imagine in the northern or in North America, in northeastern America and up into Canada, much like you would harvest the sap of the maple tree to get maple syrup, these guys are just that they've done exactly the same thing without the intricate network of pipes and boiling systems to get the maple syrup out of the maple sap. These guys are just getting water straight out of the tree. So they're using the tree as a well. So it's an above ground well that they have been able to cut a hole into and use to get water. I mean, it's just, it's mind-blowing, mind-blowing.
Very cool, man. Very, very cool. The uses of trees are endless, and some of them weirder than others. I forgot to add in with the Marula tree that the local tribes actually use it to determine what sex they want their baby to be. Yeah. So a pregnant woman will drink a concoction or an elixir from either a female tree or a male tree. If they want a girl, they'll drink the female tree's elixir. If they want a boy, they'll drink the male tree's elixir. So quite cool and crazy just on its own there. The last tree I'm going to touch on is the apple leaf tree. It is a beautiful tree, and its Latin is Phalaenoptera violacea, and common names we cannot use to identify things because they have different names. So in Southern Africa, we call it an apple leaf tree because the dead leaves, if you pick them up and you crunch them, it sounds just like somebody biting into a beautiful Granny Smith apple. And now I start salivating just thinking about it. These trees form very important reasons for many different things. Their roots actually have a poison called rotenin inside it. And what the Bushmen used to do is actually dig out a root and then take that latex that's filled with rotenin and drop it into small ponds. And what rotenin does is it deoxygenates the water source, bringing all the fish to the top. Now, there's always a balance, again, between how things roll. And the way, one thing that happens with this tree is in Botswana, it is called the rain tree. The reason is if you stand underneath it, you will have lots of droplets hit you. It is not rain, it is urine from a little beetle or a little bug called a spittle bug or a frog hopper. You might have heard of a frog hopper. In their nymph form or this young form, they actually sit within a ball of what looks like spit. It is known as cuckoo spit or frog spit or snake spit. And effectively what it is they tap into what is called the xylem, which is the phloem, sorry, which is the water source that gets sucked up from the ground. Effectively, there are two sources or two ways that trees transport nutrients. The phloem takes water up to the leaves or water and nutrients up to the leaves, and the xylem brings down the sugary sources of food that were made in the leaves to be stored in the roots. So it's not often that you'd find something going for the less nutritious option. But these guys will tap into it and they excrete, because there is such a water dose they actually are urinating this out, and they create these little spittle balls which form protective coverings for themselves. They do very little damage to the tree, fortunately for the tree, but they have evolved a special breathing tube that has to pop out of there so that they can breathe and stay within there. Now, normally animals shouldn't be able to survive on such low nutrients. It is incredibly low nutrient source, this liquid that's going up the phloem. But they have two symbiotic bacteria in their guts which create all the necessary amino acids that they need. Then as they grow, they turn and change into the adult frog hoppers, and these guys are crazy because they can jump as high as 70 centimeters vertically. They can accelerate at 4,000 meters per second over 2 centimeters, which effectively means they are pulling 400 Gs. Now, we die at like 14. They are pulling 400 Gs on a jump, jumping over 100 times further than their difference, than their body length. Now, that's the phloem. If something that taps into the xylem, aphids, a lot of you who have roses or gardens will know that aphids are bad news. These guys tap into that nutrient-rich stuff. And this is a very cool symbiotic relationship where you have ants that farm aphids. They actually move them from plant to plant, protect the aphids, because these guys now, because of the rich sugary sap that they're sucking in, will give out these little beads called honeydew, which is a little sugary thing, and the ants will drink this and look after them in order to move them around. So there's many different parasites or ways that things go onto trees. We've spoken about ants, we've spoken about different things, we've spoken about how trees can send out these scents to tell the other trees, listen, something's eating me, pump your tannins. Now, trees can also do it if they get accessed by caterpillars. What happens is the trees will let off pheromones, which things like hornbills or other birds that eat these caterpillars will pick up the scent and go, there's food. So the tree's actually calling in these animals to come and feed on the caterpillars. Trees are highly intelligent in a completely different way to what we understand. Their communication moves at 1 meter per minute. That's why it takes so long for a tree to start pumping tannins, because of these things that are moving up and down. So Matt, what else do you want to tell us before we go to questions?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that we were asked prior to this, the webinar, was that the relationship and how trees can communicate. And African trees, for the most part, are not, unless you go into the Central African rainforest, they don't have that ability to be touching in like a canopy in a rainforest. So the interconnectedness is far more divided, let's call it that. And so they rely on other cues, much like what we were talking about with the acacia, where it's almost like a pheromonal cue that gets passed on, because that underground root system doesn't connect. And so like you were saying now with the tannins taking, it's about, what is that? You said it's about a meter a minute for their communication to move through. And yeah, it's just the way they are able to communicate in even those bursts is just, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
The other way that they do it is also by using fungus. So fungus is an incredibly important part of a tree to get its nutrients, because fungus can't make its own food. So what it does is the tree actually allows the fungus to enter the root, to actually go put itself inside the root and put its filaments in. Now, to explain, 1 teaspoon of soil has about a mile of fungus filament within it. So what you see of a mushroom is only it's not even an iceberg amount. There's so much more of it going around. And each of these trees is then interlinked by its fungal filaments that cross over, and the funguses communicate, or the fungi communicate across one another. So if one tree is being attacked by something, or there is a disease on it or something, the fungus will then communicate that there's not enough food going through and tell the other trees to protect themselves. So there's another way of communication that goes on with these incredible creatures.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Unreal. You ready for some questions, Matt?
I am. What we got, Ted?
Gentlemen, that was just incredible. My gosh, so many facts, so much amazing interconnectedness that is facilitated by these incredible organisms. Thank you for all that you have taught us here today. The comments that I've gotten so far are just so grateful for all of the amazing content that you all have presented here. So let's dive into a couple of questions here. Let's start with some questions around the sausage trees. What time of year do the sausage trees bloom?
They were blooming. I'm just because I was actually thinking about that today. I mean, I lived in that camp for a decade, and I would say it's around, what is it, about November, December? Wouldn't you say, Rich?
Yeah, October, November, December, definitely the warmer parts of the year.
Yeah, so late spring into early summer.
And does the flower of the sausage tree smell bad to humans?
It's not bad. It's just a very, very strong smell. So it's not like that almost carrion-like tree that Rich was describing earlier. It's more of a, if you were to imagine like a strong rose. So it's just it's a strong scent. It's not a horrible scent at all.
Right on. And if one of those sausages could kill an impala, do the animals have a sense of when not to stand under the tree, or do they avoid the trees altogether?
Well, the sausage will come after the flower will. So typically, if their flower's on the ground, the sausages, if they're there, they're from the last year, the previous year, and then there won't be as many of them around. So there might be a big tree, one or two sausages, but there are a lot of flowers under the tree. And so there's no need for anything to be under the tree if there are plentiful sausages above it.
Excellent. All right, we're going to move on to some baobab questions right now. Do mouse lemurs pollinate baobabs by getting pollen on their fur? Or in what way?
So effectively, as they go in for the nectar, their faces will get covered with the nectar, with the pollen, and then as they move along. But what's fascinating is a lot of the Madagascan flowers for the baobabs actually only open and close in one night. So those mouse lemurs really need to get moving. They have to get all of those jobs
24
done
hours, yeah.
in a 24-hour period.
And are the baobabs only found in East and Southern Africa, or are there other places around the world where you're able to see those?
West Africa, you do find them in West Africa, so Senegal, Ivory Coast, Gambia, and then Northern Australia. So they are very specific to dry, more arid environments, and then they like very well-drained soil. So typically sandy or rocky soil. So West Africa, they're found in the coastal regions. Madagascar, they're found only in Western Madagascar, coastal and dry deciduous forest. And then Northern Australia in that sort of Darwin, Kimberley belt, where it's really hot, really dry, and really well-drained soil, rocky soil.
And I would assume then, since you're found in all of these different areas, they can be artificially replanted?
Yes, they can be.
All right. For those people that were using the baobab as a well, does that hurt the tree, or will it eventually kill the tree?
So if you were to look at a tree as Rich was describing in the apple leaf tree, they've got a network of veins going up and down, much like we do in our neck. So you've got your arteries and your veins going up and down, carrying blood to the brain. Now, if you were to create a ring, where the expression ring barking a tree comes around, if you were to create a ring around that tree, thereby cutting off one of those transactional directions, then yes, you would kill it. These guys, they've just cut a hole into the tree. So unless the tree gets some form of an infection, which trees do get, if it gets some form of infection, like a gangrenous rot or something like that, then yes, it would kill the tree. But I'm assuming that because of the sacred nature of a lot of these trees to a lot of these villages, that if they had done something like that and it killed the tree, they would have then not done it again. As far as I know, this is not just an isolated occurrence in this one village. I think it's a practice in Western Madagascar.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier how the baobab powder seems to be a sort of a new healthy food product, and that's certainly true here in the U.S. market. Would this new interest in baobab powder and such jeopardize the ecosystem, resulting in over-harvesting of the fruit or cutting the trees down for reasons of getting or harvesting these products?
In my humble opinion, I think it can only help because it means we're more intent on saving these trees and keeping them going. They're very long-lived trees, so you're talking trees that can live between 1,000 and 3,000 years long. It's an incredibly long-lived tree, and unfortunately, in areas where there's overpopulation of elephants, they get knocked down. So we're then taking a further step to try and protect these trees. I know I've spoken to some of the locals at Mashatu, where they're using chili water that they brewed to put around the edges of the baobab trees to protect them from the elephants pushing them over because there's such a loss. So I think in the long run, it'll probably help us save them rather than lose them.
Excellent.
Yeah, agreed.
One of our listeners shared that they have an allergy to certain tree pollens. And is there a time of year that's best to visit Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, where the pollens are reduced? Is that something that can be planned around in terms of a safari?
Definitely your winter time would be your best time. Yeah. Very few flowering trees because it's our dry season. So in the height of the dry season, I would come sort of towards the August, September, October times, maybe August, September, to avoid those rains and anything like that. There will be more dust, so I hope there's no dust allergy involved, but that's that for me. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, any time in the winter, so from sort of May through till early September. But then you will have to, then it is dust, so it's one or the other. Pollen, you've got almost none of it in those times, but then you've got a little bit more dust.
Excellent. One of our listeners, fascinated by the topics that you all have shared here today, and wondered if there is a book or a couple of books you may recommend that where perhaps you learn some of this information, or that might cover trees from your part of the world.
I think there's the best book I've read, just going into the more wow factor of what trees really are, and it really opened my eyes to it, was The Hidden Life of Trees. I can't think of the author's name, but it is an unbelievable book just describing some of the research that's been done on trees.
Yeah, he's a German forester that just spent most of his entire career just studying that interconnectedness. But then for the most part, these trees that we are talking about, the Madagascar, the 8th continent, describes baobabs pretty well and quite nicely. And then, yeah, any of our guidebooks for most of Africa will describe these pretty well.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, I want to close today with a comment from one of our listeners as well. And I apologize that we haven't been able to get to all the questions here so far, but we're out of time. But I just want to share this one comment. Matt and Rich are so entertaining, they could make any topic interesting. Who knew the trees were so incredible? So I've seen comment time and again in here about how entertaining and informative your presentations are, and you've got a really, really great fan base out here, myself included within it. So I just want to thank you guys once again for another incredible presentation, and I want to thank everybody who was able to join us today. Please remember that today's presentation will be available in a recording. We'll send that out to you all after the webinar is over here. Thank you again, and I wish you all a great day.
Thanks, Ted. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ted.